Hello, Franchexians, and welcome to the Into Final Space podcast. For those joining me for the first time, my name is Gabe Jones, and I am your host, bringing you exclusive fan experiences and cast and crew interviews from Adult Swim's Final Space. For some awesome episodes, including Olin Rogers himself, check out the Into Final Space podcast on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So, what's happening in this episode? Well, we're in a bit of a transitional period here on the podcast. Into Final Space Volume 2 is coming very soon with some new fan opportunities, artist interactions, theories and predictions, and of course, brand new interviews. A bunch of information on that stuff will be coming very soon, but right now we're wrapping up this season with a short series called Season 2 in Review. I've invited back some of your favorite guests and one brand new one to talk about your favorite parts of Season 2. Today, I am joined by one of the most talented artists I've had the pleasure of meeting. Let me welcome Final Space Art Director Devin Roth, DVO, to the show. All right, DVO, welcome back to Into Final Space. Joining me via Skype. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, dude. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. First of all, let me say thank you for an incredible season.
Thank
for me
you.
Personally, the art was impeccable over the entire season. I loved every moment.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I was so happy, so proud with the hard work that everybody did with the show. You know, from our amazing design team, story team, directors, production, everything on the Shadow Machine side to the insanely talented, amazing. I can't say anymore how awesome Jamfilled is as an animation studio and the work that they do. But they really, executed the work really, really well to the nth degree. And I'm really proud in my stage in my career that I'm able to work with so much talent and collaborate on making something really dope for the viewers to watch.
Well, thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, man.
All right, so Season 2 in Review is really kind of about the fan Trexians out there and what they want to hear. So I had them submit some info to a questionnaire. So you and I are just going to dive into that a little bit, talk about some of your thoughts and your responses, the good, the bad, and the incredible.
Yeah.
But first, I had them pick out their favorite episode. Just
Ooh.
for a note, runner-up was Chapter 14, which took 28.6%.
Ooh, that's a runner-up, huh?
Yeah.
I thought 4 would probably be everyone's favorite, but
I personally love 4. But Chapter 19 took the cake with 35.7% responding that was their favorite. So we're gonna talk about The Closer You Get just a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So in addition to being one of the more emotional episodes, of course, of the season, Closer You Get seemed like a very design challenging episode, including a lot of really interesting character design. So if you don't mind, we can get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit of like the origins of starting to work on this episode, going back to the story and what you first had to think about when making Chapter 19?
Well, we knew that Chapter 19 was going to be a fun episode to work on because the episodes where we could kind of be a little bit more sci-fi in the sense of going into those kind of deeper those deeper storytelling moments of telling emotional horror / adventure tales is always more interesting to us than telling gaggy type of stories. At least I think to Ben and I. But I actually tend to get overly excited on this occasion because it just reminds me of movies that I grew up loving and things that I was always inspired by and trying to make whatever my version of that would be in the cartoon form. So it's more of an opportunity to kind of explore high concept, almost comic book like ideas
Yeah.
of doing visual storytelling. And this episode isn't really the most complex episode as far as design. If you look at episodes like episode 11, where we're doing a chase in a city and have to worry about crazy buildings and
Yeah.
high levels of detail and stuff like that. Those types of episodes are a little bit more taxing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily. That's more of like an adventure kind of fun vibe.
Right.
Whereas episode 9, you get to kind of bounce around to all different types of genres, mostly horror, sci-fi, and some sort of emotional drama.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And personally, I'd like to see more, emotionally driven dramas in American animation, just because otherwise it kind of borders the fence lining of anime and Western animation.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
it'd be more. I don't know. I think it'd be nicer to have that sort of influence on anime, but also trying to create something that is different for American audiences or just audiences around the world in general.
Yeah, and I think that's what draws in a lot of Western audiences to anime is it does have a lot of that deeper underlying emotional story to it.
Well, I almost think that Western companies, networks, and stuff like that think that kids won't really understand or won't find the drama aspect of storytelling interesting as much as they would enjoy the slapsticky humor of like a Family Guy episode.
Right.
So that kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I'm glad we're in this sort of streaming culture right now where there's all these opportunities for new content to get made.
Yeah.
And for people and creators to push the envelope of the way things were done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this episode, talk about a little bit of kind of the major designs and some of the cooler pieces of this episode. Starting with the major design for the Clearwater Planet and the Time Waterfall, which are really cool design aspects, I've thought.
Yeah, so a lot of these ideas, which I said are mostly they're the most sci-fi parts of Final Space. Most of the time the script comes across the supervising director's plate, and he has to. And this is a Ben episode, so Ben tends to love these episodes more often.
Yeah.
Anything that's a little bit darker sci-fi usually comes from Ben, and he and I shared an office for season 2, and both of us didn't know what the heck we wanted to do with a lot of this stuff, because a lot of the ideas in the script were so out there that we were trying to figure out, okay, in the script it says there's a waterfall in space, so how the heck are we going to show that? How is that even going to work? So a lot of the times with that, while Ben is trying to figure out the flow of the episode and figure out what type of visuals he wants to portray, I get to work with the artists and start to kind of brainstorm a little bit with what we want to put into the show. So a lot of the things that Ben wanted in the episode, he would do a couple quick thumbnails, especially for like Phil. Phil's an awesome character design, and
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, moving into sort of the horror aspects of that episode, and with the big giant black guides and the death tree, and then moving on to Phil, some of those more ambitious character designs.
yeah, and those ideas were ideas that him and I were passing back and forth, and then we'd because we like this to be a collaborative method of working with the other talent, because we have a huge pool of talent working on the
Right.
show. So it would be silly of us to not utilize it as much as possible and get as many ideas on the board.
Yeah.
Um, Rather than it just being like, we're the ones that make the decisions. This is subjective art, blah, 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 blah. We want contribution
Yeah.
in making the project. So, Adam Fay was given the task to help solidify Phil's design, and he had some really great ideas based off of these like little sketches and thumbnails that we were coming up with internally while figuring out the story and stuff like that. And we let them have as much fun as possible because Adam is a veteran at this point of Final
Yeah.
Space.
Yeah.
He's been there since the beginning, and he pulls a lot of the heavy lifting of the character design nowadays. And we definitely wouldn't be able to get through a lot of this stuff if it wasn't for the awesome design team that's able to really solidify these ideas onto the screen, and I usually try to jump into all the thumbnails that we get through the board artists and try to visualize how the flow of the tonally color and whatnot is going to come out.
Yeah.
So things like the waterfall, that's kind of my bread and butter. And Annette Huckle, she was one of our main background painters. She has been a workhorse just like Adam since the very beginning, and she's done a lot of the really really intense sequences in Final Space as far as painting. But she'll take a lot of my key colors as far as like what I want to show in the shot, and she'll go and expand on it a little bit more.
And when I interviewed you the first time, you talked a little bit about how you were really ambitious for the color scripts that you had this season.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so.
Yes.
That.
Yeah. So the color scripts, the whole, and I don't know if I explained the whole reasoning behind doing these types of color scripts, but a lot of times in television you don't really get the opportunity to do color scripts because these schedules are just so quick, and we have to get designs done in like 2 weeks normally. And when you have hundreds of designs to get through in a short amount of time, you have to be clear about the ideas right off the bat. So that's the great thing about Olin and Ben, is them trusting me to have an understanding of what the visual cues in each episode are. And because they like my approach to color and design and stuff like that, they more or less just kind of let me do my thing with this. But I tend to go towards more vibrant color with intense sort of undertones to it. And and I kind of always stick to the same type of palettes that best describe who I am as an artist, with like the pinks and the vibrant colors and stuff like that. I try to create like a visual, book for how this show is made, so if you were to look at and describe certain parts of Final Space, you could pick out certain things that really stick out about the show.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's just how you have to make content, is you have to kind of think of it more as like a not necessarily like a brand, but like what's the voice of the show.
Sure, yeah. And I really think that really stands out with Final Space because, I mean, thinking back through the season, you remember, stuff like the Time Waterfall, you remember the spaceport, you remember Gary's dream sequence. So it's a lot of those really vibrant colors, those bright blues and pinks, and I mean, that's what really people see when they look at Final Space, is those parts that stand out.
I will tell you an interesting story with the with Final Space in episode 9, because we've never seen Final Space really.
Right, I was going to ask about, this was our first glimpse at Final Space.
Yeah. So we've never really seen Final Space before, and both Ben and I and Olin didn't really know exactly what type of imagery we would see in the world. And I think some of my pitches in the room were, it should kind of feel like this weird world where you don't know what's up and what's down, what's right, what's wrong, sort of thing. I kind of just wanted it to be more of like a visual sort of have some sort of visual eeriness to it that could kind of be open ended to people asking more questions than anything.
Yeah.
At the beginning, and then and hopefully later down the line in season 3 or whatever, that we would lean into some of those ideas a little bit more. So I had this idea, and the inspiration came from a doctor's appointment.
Okay.
When I was getting my eyes checked. So I've been staring at computer screens for majority of my 20-year career in animation, and my eyes have been getting a little bit blurry just in certain parts, and so I've had to wear glasses a little bit more and that sort of thing. And I was getting my eyes checked, and the checkup came out great. And I don't know, do you wear glasses at all, Gabe? Do you?
Yeah, I do.
So do you know when you go and you get they take that photograph of your eye?
Yeah.
And you could see all the veins.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a super microscopic.
Yeah.
And the colors are
Final Space
usually
design.
like green and red.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked at that photo. I'd never had a photo like that before, and I said, "Man, this is such a cool image. It looks like a nebula, like some sort of otherworldly space item."
Yeah.
And I took that and I sent it to Olin. I said, "Dude, we should do this as the background. We should use this
I see it.
as Quinn when Quinn's floating with all the other dead Garys. That this could be the eeriness, and maybe in the future we can explore those veins, and maybe they're like big worlds within that and stuff like that. Like we could kind of traverse in the future." And that goes into that more high concept sort of matrixy type of thing.
Yeah.
That I like to explore a little bit. But I think you're imitating. Art imitates life, and a lot of sometimes the inspiration doesn't just come from other movies or other art. It just comes from things that you come across in your average everyday life sort of sequence. But that's cool. Yeah, that's Final Space is actually in my eye. So I have a little Quinn in my eyeball right now, looking out, just begging to get out.
Yeah. Well, now you have the whole crew, right? I mean, season's right. We got everybody in there now.
I know, the whole gang. The whole gang is there.
Yep. And so I'm going back to chapter 9 a little bit. I think probably one of the scariest and coolest is the Invictus possession of Gary. It's really fun to watch, and the Kato fight scene was impeccably animated. So you want to talk about that a little bit? That'd be awesome.
I mean, I got to hand it to the board artists for coming up with some really, really interesting fight sequences that were more dynamic and less flat. And big kudos to Jamfield for taking that even further with insanely smooth animation that just felt like it was coming out of a awesome anime.
Yeah,
like
that's
Dragon Ball
that's
Z
really
episode or
yeah.
something. But yeah, again, the whole energy of Invictus is kind of again in that sort of pink realm of things where, like I said, I think some of my favorite color palettes are, using pinks, reds, blacks, vibrant colors that kind of pop, more or less. I know a lot of sci-fi tends to be now, or at least sci-fi nowadays tends to be a little bit on the colder side, but I kind of like, movies or sci-fi movies that really pushed the neon colors of things. And I think, I'm a big fan of like Tony Scott movies, like True Romance is one of my favorite movies of all time. John Carpenter, again, all those John Carpenter movies, The Thing, stuff like that intensifies colors for certain moments,
Yeah, yeah.
I always lean towards. And also anime too. A lot of the blown out lights that you see in Final Space, things that are kind of like, if you look outside, there's a moment, I think in episode 2 or 3, with Ash sitting at her bed, and you see behind her window, and it's just kind of like a blown out white fluorescent light. Things like that I wanted to push more in the show, and I was really inspired by, in movies like Akira and stuff like that. If you look at those movies where they do, Neo Tokyo, and they have that sort of, obviously that 80s undertone with the neon lights and the very, very like flushed out green colors and stuff like that. Those are things that I'm really influenced by. I'm all over the place when it comes to my inspirations. It's film, it's anime, it's animation, comics, music. It's a little bit of everything. I try to be very open-minded when it comes to learning about new things or seeing new things.
Yeah. And I think all that kind of led to, Fantraxians really just have an incredible way of combining words to make new words when it comes to this fandom. So, we had Invocado come along, kind of wrap up that episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Close You Get was probably one of my favorite episodes, and it was an exceptional job from the art team.
Yeah, we had everybody was on point there, and I like when we can get into a good groove with our painting, and a lot of times too is we'll have people come in and come out of the show, on the production if they get opportunities on other productions that they want to follow, then we give them that opportunity to do that, because I've definitely been in that position where I've had to leave a show after a couple seasons because I wanted to pursue my dreams of what I want to be as an artist.
Sure.
But it also brings us it gives us a good opportunity to bring in new talent that might see things a little bit differently and have some fresh ideas that I think makes Final Space unique. And I think that's what's so cool about this community, coming from internally with the artists that have as much freedom as they want when it comes to the designs of things, to really explore and push themselves as artists, to the online community of Fantrexians that get to talk to the creator almost on a daily basis about animation, film, and just their favorite show. I think that's great, and I wish more shows would kind of do that. But it's a very unique show to be a part of, to have all this closeness with everybody that enjoys the same things that we internally enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about everybody's favorite episode. So now we're gonna go to the questionnaire and just look at some people's favorite parts of the art this season.
Cool.
And if you just want to, if I say something that just kind of pops to your head that you really want to talk about, please just let me know.
Yeah. No problem.
So it's just some of the notes from people. I really love the colors and the environments. Everything felt so natural yet surreal. Not only was it a huge improvement from season 1, but it really puts the show above a lot of the other cartoons on television right now.
Cool. Thank you. That's awesome.
Let's see. I really loved how fluid the motion was this season. Everything was very smooth. So as always, jam-filled. Great job.
Yeah, I can't. I'm probably going to be beating a dead horse as often as I talk to my colleagues on different projects in animation and just tell them how awesome Jamfield is as a team. And I can't wait to see what other projects they jump into and they work on, because I think they're really going to do some cool things for animation that I'm going to be inspired by, and I wish I could work with them for a long time, but you never know.
Yeah. I absolutely loved and adored the background art. Each new planet and location felt unique and interesting, which I think Final Space does an exceptional job of not getting boring of where we're going each episode of
You
having
know
something
what? And I
new.
don't know if you agree with me, but do you feel like we spent less time in space this season?
It was a lot of terrestrial bound. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought so as well.
Yeah, because I feel like season one, we really, really kind of experimented and explored with the star fields of
Yeah,
Final
yeah. And
Space
I
a
think
lot.
some people missed that this season because
Mhm.
just a few of the people I've spoken to are like, I missed the Hubble imagery from last season.
Yeah.
um, but I think what did go on with the kind of planet balance of this season was really well done.
Well, I kind of look at it in a couple different ways. I look at season one as kind of the alien and season two as aliens,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So
Yeah, yeah,
season like Alien as a movie, I feel like is a little bit more artsy and a little bit more kind of figuring itself out as far as the tonally what type of film it wants to be. You know, it's more of a horror movie, obviously, and that sort of
sure.
thing. But tonally, I think it's slower. You know, I think it's hanging on imagery a lot more. Whereas Aliens is more of your like action adventure focus on the characters
Right.
type of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
They're both great movies in my eye. Um, it's just one is a different genre than the other, and one chooses to focus on the characters' um, adventure more than like what's going on internally with the characters on the
Yeah.
first movie.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, a lot of people are just fans of how fluid it was. A
Mhm.
lot of the quick movement. Um,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
visuals
that
of the backgrounds always fabulous.
I hope that we try when we create production art for Jam Filled. I know the backgrounds can be a little bit tricky because there's a lot of technical things that you have to really worry about when you're creating art that is being made in Photoshop and then being transferred to Harmony, which is the software that we use to animate, or that Jamfield uses to animate
Yeah.
Final Space. So there's that. The tough part is technically trying to be on the same page when you're so far away from each other and trying to get things done as quickly as possible. So, you know, Jamfil did a really good job of taking the background work that we gave and trying to make sense of it as much as possible. Um, and it's one of those things where, you know, production pipelines just have
Yeah.
to, every season they get tighter and tighter and tighter. And as production flow gets easier to work with, you'll notice that the qualities of the shows get better and better and better as well. It goes across the board with like any show, you know. You
Yeah.
look at your favorite shows that are still around today with your Simpsons and whatnot. They all started at very different artistic settings before they really figured out how to make the show properly.
Sure.
So yeah, Jamfield does a really good job, and I we try to make the designs, the character designs, especially as simple as possible to make the performances better in animation because we want the animators to not have to worry about details as much
Sure.
as worrying about the performance of the acting. So, you know, for instance, I think you'll see in a bunch of episodes that Gary's animation is just stellar. Like some of the acting that comes out of it is some of the best stuff I've ever seen in TV animation. Um, Down to the just like the subtleties of eye movement, you know, expressions and animators really having fun with the characters rather than just using the rigs and puppeting them around. You know, we're trying to make this a more traditionally favored show than a puppeted type of show
Yeah.
as much as possible.
All right. So another thing that was praised that I'd also like to speak about is somebody said when it almost looked 3D. Yeah, the transition between 2D and 3D animation in Final Space is always exceptional.
Yeah, and that's something I've always been heavy on my soapbox at the at Shadow Machine was
Yeah,
wanting to make the 3D work not look as obvious as you would see in other shows. And it's tricky, dude. It's so
yeah,
tricky to come
yeah,
up with a 3D pipeline that doesn't feel super stiff and out of place. And many shows have tried that, tried to blend the two. But it's different. You've got things that are being animated on ones against other organic things that are being animated on twos and threes. Um, and hopefully people understand that animation term. But that's where it gets tricky, and line weight issues. Trying to make the Crimson Light look like it was drawn with drawn lines and stuff like that.
yeah,
Being able
yeah,
to mix with it's kind of like you look at I'm gonna come back to Jurassic Park because I think that's just a great example of using all sorts of mediums to make something, to make a world feel tangible. So you've got the T-Rex, who in that famous shot where he's coming out of his pen and sniffing out the kids in the car, or in the in the vehicle.
yeah,
That blend of 3D film, filtering, texturing, that sort of thing, mixed in with puppetry, mixed in with just good composition, I think is a great example how you don't have to just lean on one type of medium. You can take little pieces of everything to kind of blend it together. So people don't know what's right and what's wrong. With Final Space, it's we try to do all the extreme shots, all the dynamic shots with the ships in 3D, obviously, but then moments where like the ship is static or it's landed and things like that. That's where we would take out our puppets. Our puppets being the traditional art that we hand draw in Photoshop and whatnot, just to kind of, and to add more texturing and whatnot. So if like we see this cool shot of the Crimson Light flying through space, and then it just landed on a planet, and then our characters walk out of the walk out of the ship, then we can kind of see how things are blending and changing and working together a lot of the times.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, I also asked, if anybody really thought anything that could be improved if next season comes up, and there really didn't seem to be any criticism. So great job for killing it.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel I felt pretty good about. I was really really happy with how the last episode came out too, because I think that is where the peak of the show could be. As far as technically, all the line weights with the characters and the backgrounds are working
yeah,
really well with each other. Colors are working great. Animation is stellar. 3D work is not really noticeable.
yeah,
Stuff
yeah,
like that. And if we can kind of just keep going in that direction, I think the show is just going to be stellar.
yeah. All right, and so here's some quick questions before we go into a break and then into our live Discord question session.
Hmm.
So, we had some people submit some questions. So, let's see what some good ones are. Um, Somebody asked an interesting question here. Noli Me Bully was she said, as an artist, or if they said as an artist, who
Excuse me.
is your most and least favorite character to work on?
My favorite character to work on,
Your favorite and least favorite, which
and least favorite.
interesting.
So I would say, yeah, that's a tough one. I'd say my favorite character to work on. I don't know. I like working with Gary's character a lot. I think
Yeah,
his character, Olin, has so much, you know, so much explosive personality
Yeah.
that it's fun to do different. And I think you could see it in the animation. I think the animators also have fun with that. There's so many highs and lows with this character that make it fun to pose him out and to act and that sort of thing. The same with Lil Kato too. I think both of those characters are really fun to kind of work with because at this point, Olin and Steven Yeun are those characters. I can't see anybody else playing them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At this point, because they've done such good performances. And I say my least favorite character to work with is probably Bolo. I'd say that with all of our designers and stuff like that, I'd say Bolo is probably the most difficult to work with.
Yeah.
He's such a high level of detail and so many arms and muscles and things like that it's just a pain in the butt. We try to, especially in that last episode, in episode 213, we tried to supply Jamfield with enough key poses for Bolo.
Yeah.
To make the show more dynamic. The problem we didn't want to create just like a turnaround rig, of this character and then try to manipulate the rig to fit the dynamic shots that the board artists were making. We wanted each shot to feel traditional in the sense of just trying to build those poses for Jamfield so they can, take them, convert them to vector and harmony and do all the in-betweens that way and just expand on the animation a little bit more, making it more dynamic. So a lot of the times in harmony types of shows, when you take a production turnaround and just say, we're going to use this for the majority of the show or for the whole show, I just feel like it stiffens a lot of the potential of what the show could be, as far as the dynamic aspect. But sometimes you can't really get around that. I feel like animated sitcoms tend to just flow with that sort of idea of just using the turnarounds of the characters and rolling out with that, rather than an action adventure show where you've got different angles for characters, low shots, high shots, very dynamic sequences.
Right.
That sometimes it becomes really tricky to do both.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have Arrow asking, when you designed the Happy Place, how'd you come to a consensus on designing the conical shape for the ship?
So I think the idea with that was, that was a piece that was done by both myself and Tommy Scott, who was, one of our awesome conceptual artists at the very beginning.
Yeah.
That had worked on season 1, because Tommy and Brent definitely were really one of the leaders for creating the ship, the ship language,
Mm-hmm.
and interior language of the ships for each season, for season 1 and season 2. Although they only stuck around for a short amount of time at the beginning of pre-production on season 2. We really got to. I love working with those guys, and we got to really come up with some interesting concepts. I think the idea was more to create like an anomaly for the Happy Ship. Like, we just wanted it to be more of like a simplistic idea of something that could be creepy on the outside,
Yeah.
but then on the inside, it's a complete, it's the complete opposite. So you're presented, the characters are presented with this really eerie, creepy, sort of simplistic figure, but then when they go in, it's a Willy Wonka-esque world that kind of throws people into a different loop.
Yeah.
And we just thought of doing like a simple cone shape for the ship could be interesting. I think I'm a fan of gaming as well. I get some
Yeah.
inspiration from video games at the same time, and I was a big fan of messing around in No Man's Sky.
All right. Yeah.
And I know No Man's Sky has like a lot of just like
Yeah.
simplistic, but it's not. It's that, and it's also just you know films like 2001: Space Odyssey,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
other really high concept sci-fi movies that kind of play with those just very simplistic ideas. Like you look at like Independence Day is an example of just
Yeah. Yeah.
simplistic ideas for ships. That like the main mothership in Independence Day is a really cool design, I think. So stuff like that, and you can kind of see sort of those influences come out.
Yeah. Cool.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. JD here asks, what would you say was the most challenging but rewarding visual environment or sequence to create?
Um, the most challenging environments was probably the Arachnitech sequence, which seems kind of simplistic, but it was a little bit challenged. I think the Arachnitech design was really challenging at the
Yeah.
beginning, because we had so many different ideas and concepts, and then one of our directors had an interesting idea for how she wanted to do the webbing in the world, and kind of coming up with what that would look like was a lot of back and forth, and then post production after getting all the animation back from Jamfil, taking a stab at highlighting some of those ideas a little bit more.
Sure.
I'd say that, and the Darga spaceport was probably
Yeah.
some of the most tricky ones. But Darga actually came a lot easier because one of our layout artists, she's a comic book artist as well, and
Okay.
her sci-fi work is really really good. So she had a good opportunity to kind of dive into some of those ideas that were taken from kind of those Fifth Element, Clone Wars sort of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, and I think this will be our last question for the main section of the interview.
Cool.
Emily Rodriguez asked, "What was the toughest hurdle to overcome with art direction this season?" And she said
Hmm.
it seemed more epic and cinematic than it was the first season, which was really already great.
I don't think this season was actually way smoother than season one. So I think a lot of the changes that we made from season one to season two made things a lot easier on our end,
Yeah.
as far as making the show. I had a lot of ideas at the end of season one, things that I wanted to change with certain aspects of the design. So, and I can highlight a couple of those. The one was the design of the backgrounds all around as a whole, just wanting to make them more dynamic and more detailed than season one,
Yeah.
and also play with shadows a little bit more, just to bring a darker kind of undertone with the whole environment that the characters would be kind of living in for the most part. So the interior of the Crimson Light has a very dark undertone because of the dynamic nature of the ship's age, and the type of sci-fi that we wanted to tell. Be a
Sure.
little
Yeah.
bit grittier, a little bit darker with this stuff. The other thing was making some adjustments to the characters' models to make them a little bit more dynamic and feel more fleshed out. So one would be the before in season one, the characters' heads felt more detached from the bodies because of how the jawline was designed to go all the way around from ear to ear.
Yeah.
And whereas I wanted to make the characters feel a little bit more whole and less detached by removing that line that attach the chin to the lower earlobe, making the characters feel a little bit more whole
Yeah.
and less broken apart. So that was something that was transitionally it was hard, I think, because you're basically having to redesign the pipeline of the show. So the pipeline in season 1 was designed that way, to have the characters to look that way. But then if you make little adjustments to the rigs like that, then that's a big change over from season to season. So you'll notice in, I think, the first couple episodes that we kind of transitioned into that a little bit slowly, rather than do it right away, just because of how schedules and budgets and stuff like that work with it. But like I said, at the end of 13, everything came together and all the characters look exactly the way I wanted to. We made the females. We gave like Quinn and Nightfall more feminine bodies, because before they were more like noodle arms and noodle legs, and that just felt like they didn't have a lot of weight to them. So in these sequences, and you'll notice Gary's mom, Gary's mom looks more fully fleshed out. She's curvy, that sort of thing. She's got meat to her legs and arms, so that when we get into these sequences where she's fighting Nightfall, we want to feel like there's actual stakes, being put in actual weight for when they're throwing punches and kicks and whatnot. So it doesn't look like it's funny when they're doing it if they have like noodle arms and noodle legs.
Sure.
I think, those choices of whether or not to make a character funny or realistic kind of depends on the type of story you want to tell.
Yeah.
So like Gary's mom's character is more of a realistic drama sense type of character, action adventure drama, whereas Gary, has some elements of drama and emotions and whatnot, but for the most part, he's more comic relief and fun action guy.
Sure.
So I think if we were to make Gary more anatomically correct as far as like how we design legs and arms and stuff like that, I don't think a lot of the jokes and charm would come out of his acting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Whereas someone that's more serious, like Nightfall and Gary's mom, I think it makes more sense to do more anatomically correct designs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was a big change, from season 1 to season 2, was deciding on what things we were going to step away from that made the show seem more cartoony.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to move into the live question session on Discord.
All right, sounds good.
All right. All right, we'll be back in just a minute for a special live question session from Discord. All right, so this is happening live. Fans are currently submitting some questions via the official Final Space Discord as DVO and I speak. So let's just start looking at some questions through Discord. All right, so first we have Frank Finstein on Discord. What are some of your just general inspirations?
So I think some of my general inspirations, just for my visual kind of cue of deciding what I think is interesting and whatnot, is probably one from movies. So some form of cinema. I would say I'm very influenced by a lot of 80s, 90s culture of. And maybe late 70s as well, too, of just that type of art that was being created during those decades, and I think the reason for it was there's so much exploration that was being created during that time, whether it's 80s pop art to the type of poster art that was being created for bands in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah.
Films that were being taking chances and creating some of the most inspirational moments in cinema. I'm a huge John Carpenter fan when it comes down to it, and I know Ben Bajelijac is too. So we get along with some of that stuff when it comes down to it. But it's things like that, like horror films, action adventure, Jurassic Park, anything dinosaur related. I was always super into.
And of course, you had your Dino Riders this season.
Exactly. I just, it's got to happen. One day someone's going to ask me, "Hey, Devo, we know you're a huge fan of Dino Riders. We want you to take Dino Riders and turn it into something that you feel would be amazing and awesome." And I would love for that day to happen. That would probably be the one thing that I would reboot in my life.
Yeah.
I really hate reboot culture. And but at the same time, I'm contradicting myself because I do like that show a lot and would love to see a revamp of it. So I'm very hypocritical when it comes down to it. The other inspirations would have to be comic art too, because I really wanted to be a comic book artist before getting into animation, and I liked a lot of like 90s comic art, which is really weird to say because I know people would probably poo-poo the 90s art, but yeah. I thought a lot of the late 90s digital art that was being created was interesting when they were making that transition from traditional media to digital media. I always love evolution in art, so anything that kind of brings like a new tool or a new sort of way to express an idea is always interesting to me.
Very nice, yeah. And all right, I think we have another one.
Bring it down.
All right. Got Gary is my sweetheart asking, what is your favorite design from the show? I guess the season.
From season 2?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Because there's a lot of things that I like about season 2 that we've done. Probably a lot of the stuff in episode 9 is really cool. Episode 4 is really good. I think if I had to pick a singular design, I was really happy with how the Crimson Light turned out. Yeah. Really happy with that, and probably Ash's design too. I was really happy how her design came out because Ash's design has a lot of Dino Rider influence to it.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, y'all did an exceptional job, and I mean those 2 episodes I think were the top 2 that popped up in all of the questionnaires.
Yeah, I mean if it was down to Ben, Olin, and the rest of us, we'd probably want to do a whole season just like that. You know what I mean? I would love to do that. I like to go darker with this stuff. So
yeah, and there's been some hints that next season's going to be a little darker. I think
Olin is so excited to go darker with the rest of the show.
I mean, just with the whole Invictus tease from the social media posts, I think has been a real nice tease for what this next season could be with the with kind of that dark theme to it.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a really good opportunity to do something fresh and different, and I think leaning into those episodes that really kind of portray what the show could potentially be in the future, I think is a really good sign.
Yeah. Well, I know we unfortunately had to move this live session around a little bit, so it doesn't look like we have a whole lot of people joining us. But
Oh
yeah,
no, it's cool. I understand it's all this last minute, moving and shaking
yeah,
and having to make sure that we can get this done at a certain appropriate time. It makes sense.
yeah. Well, we got a couple of questions in. I know we got some from the main portion of the interview, but thank you so much. It's been really incredible talking with you, and I really hope to see you again on Into Final Space, and we're really looking forward to what's coming up next on Final Space.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Gabe.
Well, thanks for joining me.
All right.
Huge thanks to DVO for joining me on today's show. Be sure to follow him on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with his work. Season 2 in review continues next week with our next returning guest, Miss Shelby Mary, one of the lovely composers on Final Space, here to discuss the music from this season. And then after that, our brand new guest, executive producer David Sachs, will be here to talk about Season 1 and Season 2, so that should be very, very exciting. More stuff than ever is coming to Into Final Space. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Into Final Space. Join the Final Space fans group on Facebook. Come chat on the Into Final Space channel on the Final Space Discord. And as always, join us on Reddit. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to Into Final Space, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.